All right.
is parents being engaged at various levels, governing boards, PPOs, um, home and school, parents committee, and thank you for everything that you do. And we hope that you continue to give your time when you can, and hopefully inspire others to do the same. It's what makes the EMSB work as well as it does, and it contributes greatly to our success. And enjoy the parent conference.
So before we get to our main programming, we have some housekeeping details we want to relay. Everyone should have received a double-sided one-pager that will give you a rundown of today's schedule, as well as the schedule for our week-long Lunch and Learn series happening virtually this week. Hold on to this program as you will need it at the end of the event. There are some great volunteers helping us out today. We have, if you have any questions, look for them. We have the prefects in the red shirts. Most of us have name tags. Finally, since this is the keynote event, we invite you to sit back, enjoy, and engage during the keynote question and answer period. Please feel free to get up if you need, and please keep devices on vibrate while in the auditorium.
Thank you. Now for our first keynote speaker. So we teach children how to count, to read, to tie their shoelaces. We teach them to develop the abilities they need to be active and well-adjusted adults. Honesty is one of those behaviors. It forms the basis of trust in our relationships. Learning how to be honest and communicate in a respectful, kind, and truthful manner is an important skill we need to teach our children. In this talk, the psychologist Dr. Victoria on over 20 years of her scientific research to share what we have learned about what is normal, a normal part of child's development, when dishonesty may indicate a bigger problem. How we can teach children about honesty, how we can deal with our children's dishonesty, and how we can develop a close relationship based on open and truthful communication. Victoria Talwar is Canada Research Chair and Chair of the Department of Educational and Counseling Psychology at McGill University's Faculty of Education. She is a recognized leading expert deception and has published numerous articles on children's honesty and lie-telling behaviors. She has given workshops to parents, teachers, social workers, legal professionals. Among other distinctions, Dr. Talwar was awarded the Society of Research on Child Development Outstanding Early Career Contributions to Child Development Research Award, Fellow of the American Psychological Association, Division 7, Fellow of Association for Psychological Science, and she's a member of the College of the Royal Society of Canada. Dr. Talwar, the mic is yours. Thank you so much. Hello? Okay, great. So I'm Victoria Talwar, and thank you very much for that kind introduction. So today I'm going to talk to you a little bit about something I've been sort of researching in the area that I do research on children's social, emotional, and pro-social development. And I've been doing research in this area for over 20 years now. So it's The Truth About Lying, which is also the title of the book that has recently come out that I wrote really about this topic. So I thank very much the EMSB for inviting me. So here's the paradox about lying. We don't like people to lie. We do not like to be lied to. We rate people that lie to us very negatively. We feel very badly towards them when they lie to us. And honesty is highly valued. It is highly valued around the globe. This is a trait, a virtue we really value. And if you think about it long enough, there's a very good reason for it. It is at the basis of our social communication. Now you think, okay, what does that mean? Well, pause a moment, and maybe after this talk, take a moment to really think about this. But if you go back, we've had a short day, it's only the morning, but go back yesterday. Think of all the people you talked to yesterday and all the conversations you had. Maybe you were like me and you went to the garden center to get some plants, and maybe you wanted to know where the tomatoes were, and you asked the person, you know, where are the tomatoes, where are the vegetables? And he said, you know, down the aisle and to the right. In that moment, you just go, okay, right, down the aisle to the right. You don't stop and think, well, is he telling me the truth or not? Because an underlying assumption in our communication is that people are trying to be helpful, accurate, and truthful. Think of all your interactions that you had yesterday and the day before. Unless you had some reason to believe that the person was being deceptive or to be suspicious of them, you always took that as an assumption that they are being truthful. And when now review all of those interactions and suddenly take that assumption away, take it away that people are going to be truthful and accurate. Suddenly things fall apart. You can't get anything done. How can you have a team meeting about a project? Suddenly nothing that people say could be truthful. You don't know what to believe. How do you go to class and listen to the teacher? You don't know what to believe. Now everything that you need to know, you have to find out by firsthand experience. Mount Everest is the biggest mountain. Well, my teacher says so, but I can't assume that's true, so I have to go and climb Mount Everest and maybe a few other large mountains too to verify that. So suddenly, this is an underlying assumption in our social communication. And when you take it away, it's at the foundation of our social communication. When you take that away, it really, really causes everything to spiral and fall out. So we do assume that people are being honest to us unless we have some reason to not believe them. It is sort of a basic assumption we use to be able to function. So this is why we value it across the globe so importantly. And when you ask people, you know, what are some traits, what are some of the top traits they're looking for in others, honesty is always there. Because when we lie, as a result, that is why we don't like it, because it's a violation of trust. It harms our social relations. We don't feel comfortable that we can trust that person anymore, and the liar loses credibility. But the paradox is that we still occasionally lie, and we actually can use it as a social strategy to achieve our interpersonal goals. And sometimes lies can even be for pro-social reasons. In fact, when we look at lying, and I'm sorry that black text is not showing up well here, but there's this spectrum of lies from sort of, on one hand, antisocial lies. And these are much more self-serving lies. These are lies to enhance your own self-interest, whether it be a psychological gain or a material gain. So lying to get something you want. Maybe you're lying to escape negative consequences. You ate that cookie you weren't supposed to before dinner time and you don't want them to find out. Or maybe you lied on your taxes so you could get a bigger rebate. On the other end of the spectrum are more pro-social lies. So these are lies told that are primarily other-oriented. You're telling lies because it enhances someone else's interests. They're psychologically, it makes them feel better, or it can be materially. So for instance, they can be a politeness lie. This is a lie that people commonly tell, you know, you get a present that you don't like very much, but you don't want to harm the gift giver's feelings, and you tell them that you like it, for instance. Lies can even be altruistic, where there's actually a potential cost to yourself, but a benefit to another. So for instance, you know, under Nazi occupation, there were people who concealed and protected Jewish people and had to lie to do that. There was a great potential cost to them if they got found out, but they were doing it because they were protecting others and upholding, you know, principles of justice and humanity to do that in a very sort of tyrannical and an unhumane system. So you can see that there can be, lies can sometimes even be told for good intentions. So how do we then study lying? How do we examine this behavior? Because, you know, if I was to say to you now, okay, tell me a lie. Well, we could do that. We could say, okay, tell me one lie, tell me one truth. That's like a parlor game, right? But the fact is that in everyday life, we don't go around saying, hey, I'm just about to tell a lie. When we're lying, we're trying to get away with it. We want to conceal it. We don't want anyone to detect it. So it's a concealed behavior. So if I just went to the park, for instance, to observe people, I wouldn't necessarily be able to observe them lying, because I wouldn't know, even if they did tell a lie, if they were lying, potentially, because I wouldn't know what ground truth was. It's not verifiable. So you need to create a situation where you can verify what actually happened. And you need it to be spontaneous, where you're not instructing the person necessarily to lie. Because in everyday life, we decide to lie, but we're not kind of signaling to the person that we're about to lie. So one of the ways that we look at this in our research lab is using the temptation resistance paradigm. We've had many different ways we're looking at it, but I'm going to just kind of stick mainly to this one today because of time. And this is one that we've used for like the last 20 years. It was developed, the temptation resistance paradigm was developed in the 1960s, then when they wanted to look at children's ability to resist temptation, and we adapted it. So in this particular one for young children, the version, we have different games, they're in a bag, they're all make noise when you squeeze them, and they're different characters, and they're exciting and interesting to kids. And in this example, it's a baby, you squeeze it, it goes, and the child has to guess, okay, what do you think it is? So we have it set up. So you see here, the child is sitting across from the researcher with their back to it. In this case, it's Elmo. And they squeeze it, and Elmo giggles. And the experiment says, what do you think it is? And the child, most children know Elmo. And they're like, it's Elmo. And they play that a few times with different toys. And then for the last one, they put out a toy. So in this example, it's Mickey Mouse. But this time, critically, the audio clue does not tell you what the toy is. It's just something being, some music being played on the phone underneath the toy. And the researcher has to go to the other room to get some paper. So they say to them, I have to go get something from the other room. I'm going to play the last toy for you, and you have to guess what it is. But don't peek at the toy. And so the researcher leaves the room for about a minute, and they're off getting the papers. And then after that, they come back into the room, and they ask the child, they cover up the toy, and they say, while I was gone, did you turn around and look at the toy to see if the child will tell them what they did or not, whether they peeked or not? And then they're asked, well, what do you think the toy is, and why do you think it's X? So if the child says, well, I think it's Mickey Mouse. Oh, why do you think it's Mickey Mouse? To see if children can give a plausible reason for why they know what it is. And we have a hidden camera that we can later find out, because the researcher doesn't know whether they have peeked or not, to verify what they actually did when the researcher was out of the room. So this is a video short clip, and what you're going to hear at the beginning of this clip is you're going to hear the door click. It's right at the start, and then you're going to see what this child does. So if we want to play that. So you see he peaked pretty fast, and that's what we find at this age. It's really hard for them to resist temptation. They're really curious what it is, and they have a quick peak. And in fact, when we see it, we see that the majority of children peak. At this age, about 82% of children peaked. So it's really tempting. At this age, they still haven't developed all the self-control to resist that temptation, and so a lot of them do peak. But then we ask them, well, when we ask them, what did you do? Did you turn around and peek at the toy? We want to see how many told the truth and how many lied. And what we found was actually 80% of children lied. So you see that the majority of children lied, but notice that there's this difference between 3 and 4-year-olds. And we've replicated this result over and over again here and in different places in the world. This is a universal pattern we see. By 4, children can tell lies. Some children at a younger age, 2.5, 3, may tell lies, but it's a lot less common and less frequent. So what about this little boy? What did he do? So our researcher that day, Kyle, comes back in, and he covers up the toy, and he asks the child. Oh.
It's a dog? So when I was out of the room, did you turn around and look at the toy? No. And you guys think it's a dog? Why do you think it's a dog?
I imagine that I saw that I think that in my mind that I saw a big puppy's tail.
Okay.
So that's a pretty good 5-year-old. That's a pretty good lie for a 5-year-old. A lot of 5-year-olds will not give you such a great cover-up story, because he goes to say, I see. Oh, I can't have said I see it. I've just said I didn't look. In my mind, I see that it was a puppy dog tail. So he's trying to create a plausible reason why he knows what it is without giving away that he peed. Which gets to the next question. Just because you lie doesn't mean that you're necessarily good at it. Can children be successful at telling convincing lies? So the first thing we did was let's show this to undergrads and to parents, not the parents of the children in the study, but other parents, just in case parents, are good at it. But we wanted to, sorry, I got ahead of myself. So we looked at both their nonverbal behavior, because you want to make sure that your facial expressions and body clues do not arouse suspicion. So when we show signs of that, we call that nonverbal leakage. And then verbal, which is make sure the content of your verbal statements does not contradict your lie. So we call that semantic leakage control. And so when we showed that to the undergrads and parents, they weren't good at it. They were at chance levels, as you see here, both parents and undergrads. But interestingly, we found that boys were more likely to be rated as lie tellers. We did not see a difference in the rate of lying between boys and girls, but we did find that adults were more likely to think boys were lying, even if they weren't. So we thought, okay, they can't be detected, but maybe just we're not good at detection. Maybe they're still showing something. So we coded their nonverbal behaviors, and we did find a couple of small differences. We found that the lie tellers had bigger smiles. So we said, did you peek? And they were like, no. Whereas the non-liars had relaxed mouths. But the important thing here is to know is that's in this situation. When we put children in different types of situations, we don't necessarily get the big smile. There's no nonverbal behavior that gives you like a clue all the time. Essentially, very importantly to know, across all research with children and adults, all researchers in this area, the consensus is, and if anyone tells you otherwise, they are completely wrong based on the research. There is no Pinocchio's nose. There's no one nonverbal tell that you can use to reliably detect a liar. And we see this all in the media all the time, that they do this, they do that, they look here, they look there. That's wrong. That's misinformation. There is no Pinocchio nose. There are certain things that can show up in certain situations, but they're not going to be reliable. But what researchers have found with children and with adults is that when we look at verbal statements, if you look at transcripts, for instance, of people's statements, you can use some criteria to detect their lies. Never, nothing is 100%. Some of it can be definitely above chance percent. And in fact, what we find with children is when we look at their ability to answer follow-up questions, we find that basically young children are poor lie tellers and have difficulty maintaining their lies when asked follow-up questions. And it's not till they get older, you see about 8, 9 years of age, that they're getting fairly good at it. And by the time we get 10 and older, they're much better at it. And in fact, what we find is that at that age, as we get older, they're as good as maybe adults are, but there are individual differences. Some become really good at it, some become less so, just as adults. So what about more pro-social lies? So I had a colleague, this was back some years ago, and they drove to the grandparents' house on Christmas to spend Christmas, and their daughter, who was 3 years old at the time, they got there, and the daughter got a present, and it wasn't what she wanted. And she was like, I don't like it. And it caused great upset amongst the adults. The grandmother was very upset, and it caused a incident on Christmas Day. So the next year, they were driving, it was like a 2.5-hour drive or something to the grandparents. On the way, they were like, remember when you get the present, you're going to say you like it and thank them. And grandma's gone to all this trouble, blah, blah, blah. So they get there, and the child gets the present, and she opens it up, and she looks at it, and there's a big pause, and then she says in a very loud whisper to her dad, Daddy, what do I say? I really like it. So these are the types of lies that we can sometimes tell, and that we can sometimes even explicitly or implicitly encourage children to tell a lie. So to look at this in the lab, we have the disappointing gift paradigm. So which would you rather have? Would you rather have a nice, colorful, slinky toy or a bar of soap? Not a nice, smelly, lush bar of soap, but a Lysol bar of soap. So we put the situation where children do a task and then a gift giver says, oh, you've done a great job. I want to give you a gift. And so you see there in the red bar, it's when they get the soap, and the green bar is when they get a toy like a Slinky. And you see in the reaction, they've been left to open it up. And you see, as you see in this child, there's not a lot of positive expressive display here. There's like, I got soap. Why did I get soap? And then the gift giver comes back into the room on the question and asks them, did you like the gift I gave you? And suddenly we see the positive expressive display shoot up and suddenly like, oh yes, thank you, I like it very much. And so we find with younger children, they're more likely to be blunt truth tellers, as in my story example. But as they get even, in the later preschool years and certainly in the school years, they're much more likely to tell these politeness lies. But younger children aren't very good when asked, like, well, why? What do you like about it? They're not very good at giving you an answer. But as they get older, we find children are better at giving answers. We infamously had one child, when we asked them, well, what do you like about it? They're like, oh, this is so good. We really need soap at home because my dad is so stinky. And that was the day we knew the soundproofing worked in the lab, because the father was in the other room watching a closed circuit TV, and he had a great sense of humor, and he guffawed very loudly. So basically, children will tell these lies. They get socialized in many ways to tell these lies. These are the kind of lies that we consider. When we rate these lies, evaluate people's lie telling, we evaluate these less negatively, these types of lies, than other more self-serving lies. So so you're like, okay, children are lying. Well, why? Why is it developing? Why do we see that difference between 3 and 4? And part of that is what our researchers said, and I'm going to kind of summarize it in a nutshell, is it's related to their emerging cognitive development. When we give them different cognitive tests, we find that it's related to their ability to start to understand other people's thought, that other people have mental states. So other people have different thoughts, beliefs, knowledge, feelings, desires from them. When they're very little, they still don't necessarily have that understanding. And it's when they start to understand that, they start to understand lots of different things. And it's very important for their social emotional development and their social interactions and their well-being. But it also means that they now can understand that they can create a false belief in someone and deceive. It's also related to executive functioning. And you see these different abilities here. These are really key for doing a lot of tasks. They're really important for academic achievement. So this cognitive development is important and develops, but also with that, you start to develop these cognitive skills that allow you to lie, to understand you can lie, and then lie better. So lying appears as a normative part of children's development. It's a very normal part. It emerges around the globe in those sort of preschool years, and its emergence and development are related to children's emerging and developing cognitive abilities. So it's kind of like this result of something that's really positive development. So that's the good news. When you first catch your child lying, okay, they're developing. They're getting better. Their cognitive skills are growing. But then that's where you come in. Parents come in by socializing children and teaching them about the value of honesty. So we'll get to that in a moment. But first of all, I want to address how big a problem is this? Well, let's look at adults. So you may have read reports, and this often is cited in the media, that adults tell 1 to 2 lies a day. And there are many, many studies that ask adults to keep records of their lying. And in fact, that's what they find. On average, adults are lying 1 to 2 lies a day. So have you told your lie today? You've still got the rest of the day to go. Now, some of you might be saying, really? I didn't think I lied yesterday. Well, Kim Sirota and some others actually reanalyzed the data, and what they discovered is this. So first of all, they surveyed 1,000 people, and they found that for the last 24 hours, how many lies they told, and they found that there was 1,646 lies told in the preceding 24 hours from those 1,000 people, which is an average of 1.64 lies per day. But when you look at the distribution, so we're just going to get into the mathematics of it now, you see that actually more than half of them, so look at this column here, more than half of people actually didn't tell a lie in the last 24 hours. It was about 40% that lied. And most of them, now looking at this, really only told like one lie or two lies. But the rest were telling more lies. And in fact, 5.3% of the sample told half of the lies. So there's a small amount that is skewing the average, right? That's the problem with averages. That they are skewing that average. And in fact, so that's 53 people told an average of 16 lies each. So what you see is that lying is an occasional adult behavior. Adults lie occasionally. When they do things where they ask adults to keep records of their lies over about 2 to 3 weeks, they find like 93, 92% have told at least one lie. So it is something that adults do on an occasional basis, but there's only a small percentage that are lying as a frequent daily thing. So you see there. And so how big a problem is this? Well, it's basically a normative behavior for most in that it's a low frequency occasional behavior. But what the data suggests is that there's a small percentage of adults who have frequent lying behaviors, around 5% or less. So we have to keep it in perspective. You know, parents sometimes worry if they catch their children lying, is this going to be a big problem? We'll keep that in perspective. So what do we know about children and chronic lying in children? Well, there's not a lot to know exactly. It depends on who's reporting, whether it's the mother who's reported, or we have some reports of teachers, or we have some reports where adults are grown up and try and remember, and the range is from like 3 to 20%, 23%. But in reality, if we look at the adult data, we're looking like it's likely a relatively small percentage. So even if it's slightly higher in children until they get socialized, I think it's going to be 10% or less as a likelihood. So there are different trajectories of lying. You know, there's some that become prolific liars, like we saw, those, you know, telling like 16 lies per day. There's some that may become pathological liars. They can't stop themselves, it's a compulsion. There may be some who are situational liars. They're actually fairly honest people, and then they get themselves in a situation where the demands of the situation that they've gone themselves cause them to become now frequent liars as a result of that. And then the majority of people are these occasional liars. It's not a frequent behavior, but it's an occasional behavior. And then presumably, as there are prolific liars, there are likely, it's not caught easily in the data, but there are presumably a very small percentage, but there is a percentage that maybe never lie. And there's certainly some, for instance, children with autism lie at a much lower frequency, for instance, than other children, and that is related to their cognitive development, because the abilities that we use to be able to lie are delayed with them. So lying can also be part of something else, and that's where if it becomes of concern. So it's actually part of the diagnosis for conduct disorder and oppositional defiant disorder, which are two disorders that are diagnosed in childhood. It can also be a result of school problems. So if the child's having problems at school, maybe they're getting behind, or they're not understanding, or they're having difficulties with, for instance, their math, they may lie to conceal that they haven't done their work, or they may be feeling shame, and they lie to conceal because they feel embarrassed that they don't know how to do it, and that can kind of like snowball for the child and get out of control. It can also lying can develop as a strategy to deal with maladaptive behavior and to help the children and youth continue doing that sort of maladaptive, harmful behavior, such as eating disorders, so concealing, so you can continue doing what you're doing in terms of eating, substance abuse, gambling addiction, internet addiction. So you can see lying can develop as a strategy to help them continue with their addictive behavior or maladaptive behavior. It can also develop as function of becoming part of a deviant peer group. And when we say that, it means, where you're aware of a group and you may be a lie because you lie to protect the group and the interests of the group, or you may be expected to lie in order to conceal sort of activities that are potentially, at the very least, harmful to others or potentially illegal. So when do you seek help? Well, most of the time, for most children, lying is just a normal part of childhood, and then you can deal with it as a normal part of childhood. But when do you seek help? Well, when it's repetitive and persistent pattern over time, and that means over a number of months. So when it's frequent lying without a clear cause and no discernible reason, they lie. When there's repeated, they're telling repeated, unbelievable, and fantastical lies. When the repeated lies place the person in a favorable light, or frequent talk of grandiosity, or lies to manipulate or control others, or a pattern of lying that's just getting steadily worse over time, over extended period of time. And when lies are told along with other behaviors such as aggression, intense rage, extreme mood swings, or lack of concern for others' feelings. Or when they're continuing to lie, even when it's interfering with their social relations. So it's causing them, they're losing friends. It's having a negative impact on them, but they still lie, almost like a compulsion. They can't stop themselves. There's another time where you seek help. Even if a child is lying, sort of what we say is developmentally appropriate, normative. Just, they're figuring out, they're a young child, they're trying to figure out what they can and cannot do, they're testing boundaries, they've got these new brand spanking cognitive abilities that allow them, like, oh, I could just lie about that and maybe get away with it. Okay, let's try that. Even if they're doing this, it may be that a parent, it's causing negative feelings for the parent and impacting the parental coping. So parents should feel comfortable that if they are having serious and ongoing difficulty coping with children's behavior, whether it be lying or anything else, to seek help, get support. You don't need to cope with that on your own. There's support that you can get and get help. It's impacting the parent's well-being, and if it's impacting the parent's well-being, it's definitely impacting the child's well-being. So you can go to the school psychologist or a therapist or pediatrician or counselor for a referral to get help if that's the case. And treatment can be a variety of treatments. It can be family therapy or parent training or psychotherapy. There's a range of it depending on the case and the situation and what is happening. So now we get to some sort of tips for raising truthful kids. So as Marika said, we teach children how to count. We teach them how to tie their shoelaces. We teach them how to do their multiplication tables. We can also, we have certain values and certain pro-social behaviors that we wish our children to be. We wish them to be, when you ask parents what they want their child to be, they usually, list off a variety of things that they wish their child to be. They wish their child to be kind. They wish their child to be strong. They wish their child to be courageous. They wish their child to be honest. These behaviors just don't happen by themselves. We can teach them. And so if they're important to us, then we should teach them and actively teach them. Parents are really key to this because parents, we're the first educators that children have. We are the first teachers children have, and they learn from us. So we can actively be engaged in teaching them about these important pro-social behaviors that we wish them to develop. So you can talk to them and teach them about honesty. And, that means you might be talking about their behavior. It might be you've observed somebody else be truthful, and you talk about their behavior. You could have formal. So some families have like family time where they talk about these things. Some people do like a virtues type of program that they do as a family. Some people have like kindness jars that is a jumping off point for conversations like this. Um, you could be part of a religious or cultural community where there's children's classes. There may be a number of ways that these conversations may be happening or children may be taught. But even then, you can have informal conversations with the child when you observe someone's behavior, for instance. And in that case, you want to draw attention to, you know, how people are sometimes truthful even when it's hard to be truthful. For instance, you see someone's at the grocery store and the man is given extra change by the clerk. And the man truthfully says, you know, you gave me extra change here, and gives it back. You know, you can comment upon that. It was against his self-interest. He could have taken that money and run. Also, you know, when people have say things that might be emotionally difficult, like, you know, saying, you know, to a father who's made, you know, special arrangements for fishing trips with his kids because, you know, he really loves fishing and big family trips, and somebody saying, you know, Dad, I don't really like fishing. I'd rather do something else with you. That's a hard thing to say. And so you can talk about that, talk about how one says that in a way that, you know, doesn't hurt the dad, but at the same time finds a constructive way to communicate that and find something else to do with dad. So you can have these conversations, and it's not a one-time conversation. It's a conversation you're going to have throughout the child's development into their youth and adolescence as they engage more and more with the world and they encounter more and more situations and circumstances. One of the best ways, and I talk a lot about this in the book, and our research really shows that this has an impact, is telling positive stories about honesty. So this means, you know, reading stories to children, you know, that talk about honesty. And from that, they can be jumping off. But even older children, you know, you can get books about honesty from the library or you know, from the bookstore for younger children. But older children, many books have in the plot lines, the characters are lying, or there may be somebody telling the truth, having to confess things. In chapter books and that, there are many incidences of honesty and deception that you can talk about as they occur in different stories and books, or in films or things you're watching on the you know, Netflix. So one of the studies, just to let you know, that we did a study where we gave children different stories. The Boy Who Cried Wolf, Pinocchio. We started this study in San Diego, and then we did it also here in Montreal. The George Washington and Cherry Tree story, which is the story of George Washington. It might be apocryphal, but nevertheless, it's a story that's out there where George Washington cuts down his father's beloved cherry tree and with his axe, because he's so excited to have an axe, and he cuts it down. And then later his father says to him, "Who cut down my cherry tree?" And George Washington says, "Father, I cannot tell a lie. It was me who cut down your cherry tree." And the father is really proud that his son has told him the truth and confessed to it. And we gave this to children 4 to 8 years of age. We read them these stories. We also had a control story, which was the tortoise and the hare, which has nothing to do with honesty. And then we put them in a temptation resistance paradigm to see if they would tell the truth about their behavior. And what you see here is the story that had the impact was the George Washington story. Now, we have replicated this study more than once, and it's now other peoples have replicated in other places like Romania and Singapore. And what we find is that, and it's not always been the George Washington story, it's just a story that has certain features. And what those features are is that, as in the George Washington story, the character models how to be honest. They show how to act. George tells the truth. And it's about something that he's done wrong, but we see the character tell the truth about something they've done wrong, which is really hard, right? You have to be brave and have courage to like sometimes admit, because you might be getting in a lot of trouble. So they see the character do that. And then importantly, they see positive consequences for being honest. So in the George Washington story, the father is proud of the son for telling the truth. So they see that the father actually thinks well of the child for doing that. So when there's these outcomes that sort of help reinforce that honesty is valued and appreciated. And when you do use stories, it's not just about reading the stories. you need to ask questions about the story and reflect on them with your child. And the amount of reflection that you're going to do and the degree of conversation will vary from a preschooler to an adolescent. But the point is to have some sort of engagement about the story, because that helps them sort of internalize it and think about it. So when you're having a conversation with them, make sure it's a conversation and not a lecture. So when you've caught a child lying, you need to keep the conversation really short. So keep it brief, just give a reminder about honesty. Hopefully you're already been having conversations about that, so you can just refer back to these things that you've been saying. And then know that the child may be defensive in that moment and is not in a space to listen to everything that needs to be said or everything. Because remember, they've just been caught in a lie. Imagine or think about a time you were caught in a lie. You're feeling a lot of emotions right then. You're not necessarily open right then to having this long conversation about it. So keep it brief. At other times, take more time. When you're not in the heat of the moment dealing with a lie, you're both more calm and you can think and reflect better. So have a discussion, ask questions, and know that the child will be more open to discussion and questions at other times other than when you catch them lying. Importantly, we catch children lying all the time. But we are less likely to catch them being honest. And that actually is really important for teaching children to be honest. It's not just about talking to them about it, it's also showing them that you value it and notice it. So try and catch them being honest, especially when they're being honest about something that they could have, lied about. They took the ball and they were like throwing the ball inside and they broke your grandmother's, antique vase. And we're often are just, I can't believe you were throwing the ball in the house. How dare you? And we get all upset. And you ask them, well, did you do it? And they, we will catch them lying. We'll get upset with it. But if they tell us the truth, yes, it was me, the ball, we often just get upset with them still about the vase. And we forget to say, thank you for telling me the truth. I appreciate that. We might still be upset about the vase. And we might still want to talk to them about why they're not supposed to be throwing balls in the house. But we can at least give acknowledgement. So it's important to catch them being honest, because if you're telling them that honesty is important, you also need to show it by actually recognizing it when it's happening. So, you can acknowledge you told the truth, or you can show appreciation. Thank you for telling the truth. Or you can use praise. Good job for telling the truth, even though it was hard. So make sure to catch them being honest from time to time as well, because if they know that, there is some that you think well of them for being honest, then they're really seeing that demonstrate to them the positive reasons for being honest, that you value it, and there's some repair in that relationship in that moment. It doesn't mean that they get off for doing, like, throwing the ball in the house, but it means that, they see that you've appreciated that they have been honest. They're more likely to continue to be honest in the future. The other thing is that we need to model honesty. So we can talk about honesty being really important and the best policy, but then, what we do sometimes belies that. So, you go to the La Ronde or the cinema and you try and lie to get your child in for a cheaper rate. You lie about their age. So what you're communicating is, honesty is the best policy. But when our self-interests are at stake, we can fudge it just a little. And maybe that's okay with you. But if that's okay with you and they turn around that behavior to you, and you're okay with that, okay. But if you don't want them to do like that, then you have to make sure that you not only talk the talk, but you walk the talk. So that means we have to think about our own behavior and make sure that we are also modeling honesty. And we have done research that really shows the impact of what happens when they see people be honest or lie. So this was a study where a former graduate, my student, she's a school psychologist now at Lester B, Presky and Garst did this study where children saw a Confederate break her glasses, and then there were different conditions. In the truth-telling condition, they told the truth about breaking the glasses, and there was a positive outcome. Prescott, he was pleased that they had confessed and told her about it. And the truth-telling condition with a negative outcome, she was upset. There was a lie-telling condition when they lied, like, I don't know who broke the glasses, it wasn't me. And there was a positive outcome, they were believed. And there was a lie-telling condition with a negative outcome where Persky got upset, didn't believe them. And then there was a control condition. And what you see here is in the truth-positive condition, when they saw the person model, they saw a model tell the truth and it led to a positive outcome, children were significantly less likely to lie about their own behavior in a temptation resistance paradigm. Interesting, also, they were significantly less likely to lie when they saw a negative outcome for lying. So when the model lied, but there was a negative outcome, they also were less likely to lie. So you can see it's not just the modeling, but also seeing the outcomes associated with that behavior that really impacts children and their decision-making about whether they're going to lie or tell the truth. When children do lie, we need to discipline calmly. So the first step is to calm yourself. It can be really upsetting to catch your child in a lie. That can be, it's a violation of trust. We talked at the beginning about why we don't like it. And so parents can feel upset. We need to be able to deal with it calmly. So sometimes it means about giving yourself almost a timeout. Just walk away for a moment and calm yourself down so you can come back to them and talk to them calmly. Also look at the underlying motivation for the lie. What was causing them to lie? So, for instance, I do some research with children about their online engagement and cyberbullying. And a lot of youth tell us that when they witness cyberbullying or themselves are victims of cyberbullying, they don't want to tell their parents. They conceal it from their parents because they're afraid that their parents are going to take their phones away from them. And often that's what the parent does. The parent reacts and goes, oh, I'm taking that phone away from you. The reaction of the parent is they want to keep their child safe. This is awful, right? But that's just confirming to the child, the youth, that their worst fears, that they will be disconnected from their social life, which is on these phones. So you need to think, why were they concealing this behavior, what it is, to be able to also appropriately act upon it. Because if you do what confirms their fears, potentially that just leads them to go, oh, I need to lie better next time. So, but on the other hand, you still have to deal with what they're doing. So if they're not doing their homework because they're with their friends on social media and they lie about it, you have to address, okay, it's important that you tell me the truth and talk about, that importance. And also you need to get your homework done and find an appropriate, you still have to deal with it, find an appropriate discipline for that. Maybe it's taking away their phone during the time they come home to get their homework done, for instance, until they can show that they're responsible at getting their homework done. So you have to then discipline the child appropriately to whatever the demeanor is. Importantly, don't set them up. So this is something that we can really do, and I've had to catch myself a few times over the years. So for instance, child is scribbling on the wall. So my son decided to scribble on the newly painted bathroom while the bathroom got renovated, and literally finally it was done after a long time. And I caught him the next day with a marker on the wall. I gave myself a timeout for 5 minutes because I thought I was going to lose it after all of that. But so you catch the child scribbling on the wall. You can say to them, "Are you scribbling on the wall?" And they're like, "Huh, I am. Maybe she didn't see me. Maybe I'll just say no. I don't want to be the kid scribbling on the wall. Mom ain't looking too great here." No. Now you have the scribbling on the wall to deal with and a lie. Don't set them up to lie. Just deal with the scribbling on the wall. You are scribbling on the wall. Walls are away. And here's an illustration of this. We did this study. This was when I was in West Africa. It was 2 private schools. And one of them had a very corporal punishment school. It was a very colonial, holdover colonial kind of authoritarian discipline model. They would slap kids or they had a stick that they would beat kids in, and they'd be over the hands, over the head, or on the bottom for more major offenses. And this was a daily frequent occurrence. I saw it all the time. In the non-corporal punishment schools, it's in the same neighborhood, also a private school, they did more timeouts. Child had to leave the room. They had verbal reprimands. For more serious offenses, they had to go see the principal. And so we had these children, and we put them at temptation resistance paradigm. And what you see here is that, and we have this Canadian comparison group. The non-corporal punishment school and the Canadian comparison school, same rate of lying. But you see the corporal punishment significantly more likely to lie. So increased likelihood of lying, but not only that, children from the punitive environment were better liars. So you can see here, at this age, 4 to 6, they're not good liars, remember. And that's what you see in both these samples. But suddenly here, they're much better liars, like by a lot. It really stood out. And so you can think about it. If you're in a really harsh punitive environment, you might learn lying as a strategy to deal with that. If you're going to get in trouble for even minor offenses, why not try and lie and get out of them? But if you're going to take that as a strategy, you better learn how to do it well fast. So we found that lying may actually be an adaptive strategy that children learn to deal with harsh punitive environments. So getting back to, making sure that the consequences are proportional to crime, if we go back to the speeding ticket analogy, if they've just told a lie the first time or they're not frequently lying, sometimes all they need is a warning. It's important you tell me the truth. I'm not happy that you lied to me. They need a warning. But then, sometimes you might have to then move up to some consequence, But think about the consequence. What is the consequence? What is actually they did? And make sure it's proportional. There's a difference between speeding at, 40 kilometers, 10 kilometers over the speed limit versus 100 kilometers over the speed limit, right? So think about that. And then very occasionally, due to the severity of whatever it is that they're lying about or the situation, you may have a go-to-jail card. That's a really serious penalty. But that is something that you only would very occasionally have to use, and sometimes you might never have to use. The other thing that's important is to set clear rules and to communicate those rules. And this is in the context of a very warm and supportive relationship between the parent and the child. Because research has shown that especially as youth are getting older and they're starting to test their boundaries in adolescence, they are more likely to respect parental authority when they feel that parents are warm and supportive and not punitive. And so they're more likely to feel that parents have the right to set rules, and they're more likely to respect that. And they report that they're more likely to disclose and tell information about their lives to their parents, which is really important because as they get into adolescence, they're less out of your sort of realm. They're out engaging in the world. And if they feel comfortable to tell you things, that's what you want them to do because you're not going to know everything they're doing. And to enlarge on that, you also need to give them space. This is true. Even, you need to show respect and respect their bids for autonomy. Even this is with a toddler, that might be, you give them a choice between one cereal and another. But as they get older, and they may want more privacy. This is very normal as they go through puberty to want that. And so understand that as they engage more and more with the world around them, you're not going to know every detail of their lives as you might have known when they were 3. And to give them some space, allow them that. You're not going to know everything about their lives. If you have your parents alive now, they don't know everything about your life now, right? So when adolescents report that when they feel their parents pry too much into their sort of personal space, they feel or their privacy, they feel often that they kind of shut down. They're more likely to conceal information. So it doesn't mean that you can't know about their lives. You certainly should ask about their day. You certainly can know about their whereabouts. That's important, and information that's related to their safety and well-being. But you don't need to know everything they and their friends talked about, for instance, or read everything they write on social media, for instance. And also understanding that this is part of an overall development of fostering their character. We want them to be, we want our children to grow up to be tolerant, respectful, kind, compassionate, honest individuals. And so we need to build the we need to help them, support them in their building these foundational skills that allow them to show forth these abilities. And that means helping build their empathy, their understanding of other people's feelings and having compassion, their self-control, their ability to regulate their own self-impulses, to delay gratification and plan ahead, their perspective-taking skills, to be able to take the perspective of others and think about what other people think and know, and helps them to engage with others in a respectful and kind and fair way. And their conscience, which is sort of developing their inner voice, our inner voices, which help us to evaluate and decide right from wrong. So I talk a lot more, we don't have time in the book, but these are sort of the foundational things that we want to strengthen in children to help them build their characters. So that when they grow up and they're starting to make their own decisions, this happens more and more as they transition through into adolescence, we have to give them space to make some of their own decisions and choices, and then as they get into adulthood, that they have these at their foundation, which help them to make good choices. And finally, we need to teach tact. We want truthful, honest individuals, but we don't want ones that are bluntly honest or kind of, just go around sort of using it as a sledgehammer on people. You can think about that. Like, think about if you work in your workplace, you've had to give other employees feedback. You need to be able to give feedback that is maybe not always positive. There's areas that they need to work on, but in giving it to them in a constructful, tactful way that, you understand their feelings. You're not trying to like tear them down, but you're trying to help build them up, kind of thing. So you need to teach them tact so that we can be honest in ways that are, not only honest, but also kind and compassionate. So to conclude, children's lie-telling emerges in the preschool years, and with age, children become better at maintaining their lies. And this is related to their developing cognitive abilities. But socialization can influence children's truthful behavior, and this is where parents play the key vital role here. Through giving them messages about honesty, for them learning about the consequences, and also through modeling of honesty. For most, lying is a occasional behavior and not a persistent problem. In fact, its original emergence and development of those early lies are just a sign of their sort of growing abilities, their growing cognitive abilities. So most of the time, it's not an issue. For some, it may develop into problem behavior, and you should seek professional help when lying is a repeated, persistent pattern that children use consistently and frequently for a long period. Then it may be a problem and seek help. Or when it's having a deleterious effect on the relationship between the child and the parent, or the child and others. So if you're interested in knowing more, there's a lot more in my book that expands on these points and gives you some additional strategies that you can use. And I'm also open for questions or comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Victoria. That was absolutely awesome. We're going to just pass around the mic. Does anybody have any questions? We can bring a mic to you. Yes. I'm going to be the runner.
Hi, my
Hi.
name is Ola. I just wanted to ask a question about what to do basically when a parent doesn't know which child lies. There's some conflict between two children. One says, oh, my sister did that. The sister says, never happened. So what do you do? How do you know who lies?
So you're talking about like you're in a situation where a child's lying. It's not your child, it's someone else's child, but the parent doesn't realize it. Is that what you mean?
No, sorry, I'm talking actually about siblings, like my children.
Oh, you don't know that your children is lying. Yeah, well, it's hard to deal with something that you don't know about. So that happens sometimes. Like people don't realize their children are lying. So you're not doing. The fact is, if you don't know about it, you're not doing anything about it because you don't know about it. But I wouldn't say, okay, go on a hunt to discover if they're lying, because I don't think we need to suddenly become like lie detectors everywhere, because that could have a negative impact on our relationship with our children. And the fact is, many children may not be lying that much. So, but if someone tells you then that there's this situation, then you may need to deal with it. So I know, for instance, an example I give in the book was a mom that came to me, and she didn't know, but her child had stolen a toy from a friend's house when they'd gone for a birthday party. So it was just a young child, and her child had stolen it, and then the mom had asked for the toy back, and the child lied and said she didn't have it. And the mom of the child didn't know anything about this. So finally, the mom of the birthday child came to the mom and said, your child stole this toy and she won't give it back, and she's lying. She says she doesn't take it, but she did take it. Well, it was a huge shock to that mom. So you have to first deal with your emotions to discover that your child's done this thing. And we have to be really careful, because there's an evaluative component with that. Your mom, this mom's telling you that. Well, maybe it could be potentially your first reaction is, how dare you? No, my child would never do that, right? Or, oh my God, my child is bad in the eyes of them. I have a bad girl, and you feel embarrassed, you feel upset, defensive. Well, the first thing is to, verify what's happening. So you need to go see if their toy's there, talk to your child about it, but also not to worry about, is your child a good or bad child? Children do things, they make mistakes, they do things wrong. That's the whole part of growing up. We learn from these things. And you as a parent, your job is to help them learn. So now your job is to help your child learn, okay, stealing a toy is not a good thing, and not a thing we do. And then how do you fix that? You teach the child how to fix it. So we have to get out of our reactive mind, which is very natural to feel it in the moment. And we have to get to that calm place to see what we can do to support the child to find a positive development from that. And that is, learning A, not to steal, B, that lying is wrong, and C, then how do you then fix the situation? We give back the toy, we apologize, and in the future, if you like someone's toy, what will you do? You'll say to me, Mom, I really like that toy we have. Could I maybe get it for my birthday? You have these conversations with them. But if you don't know about it, it's harder for you to do until someone tells you about it or you see evidence of it.
Oh, yeah.
Hi, I'm Vincent. When it comes to prolific or pathological liars, are there any indicators in children or adolescents that would determine kind of which of the two paths they would take?
Yeah, so I use the two terms, but I have to say that in science, the science has not coalesced on specific terms. So sometimes those terms get used interchangeably. But the reason I was using it is there are certain people that might be pathological, and I'm working with researchers in the US on potentially we getting this term into the DSM, which has sort of different disorders, because pathological liars are particularly people who lie. It's like a compulsion, and they know it's wrong. They feel bad about it, but they can't stop themselves. And it harms their social relationships. Like they lose their girlfriends, their boyfriends, their husbands, their wives. Employers get upset with them. They know it, but they just keep doing it. And so it really affects their well-being, and they feel really bad about it. They just can't stop about it. There may be, but there are other prolific liars. So they lie a lot. They're definitely prolific liars, but they seem to be a subset. There are other people who are prolific liars who may not feel bad about it. They might be like quite manipulative. So that's why I'm using the two terms separately. So back to your question, which was?
Are there any indicators in children that determine whether they take one?
So not at this stage. In most cases, no. I mean, it's only when, as I said, you see it as a really repeated pattern, or it seems to be this pattern that's beyond the child's control. And this is for an extended period of time, where they're lying, and the pathological lie, they're lying, and it's harming their social relationships. They're losing their friends and everything. They know it's wrong. They feel remorse, but they just keep doing it and they can't seem to stop themselves. That would be an example of that. And the other one is when they're lying and they're just lying and it's very manipulative, or it's related to other behaviors, aggressive behaviors or things like that. Then I would seek it, because lying is a symptom of, for instance, conduct disorder. And the link between conduct disorder and other disorders in adulthood is not clear, not for everyone, but it can lead to prolific lying in adulthood.
So that would also mean that you probably wouldn't see much of a transition from somebody who grew up as a pathological liar transition to more of a prolific liar. It doesn't become an addiction that they kind of harness as an adult.
So the truth is, we don't know for sure. We don't have enough data to know for sure how those development trajectories connect. Because right now the science is with children and there's science with adults. One of the things I'm trying to do with other researchers is to start connecting these dots. So we're doing studies now to try and connect the dots, because we don't know exactly how, what I have is hunches, but these are hunches, right? So my hunches are that we have some data now which shows that there are some kids who are like high liars at a childhood and they're desisters. So with time, they desist. And then we have this data that shows a really small percentage are later onset liars. And then there's this tiny percentage that are pretty lying throughout, and then that relates to criminal activity. But they're a really small percent. So we're trying to connect those dots now. We don't know for sure. I would say, children could be a frequent liar at childhood, but it doesn't necessarily mean they'll go on to be in adulthood. That's where, again, we come in. If we get them help, get them support, it doesn't mean that they're always going to be, this is going to be a behavior problem forever or behavioral pattern. Intervention can make a change there.
Thank you.
Just to say, this is going to be the last question. We are running a little late, but we're pushing along because we started late. Thank you.
Hi, Victoria.
Hi.
So you said recognize positive behavior. Thank you for telling us the truth about lying. My name is Real. I feel like your data and your science backs up what I've always known. My kids are 7 and 11, so they're mastering the art of lying, from what I understand. We're trying hard as parents to positively influence. But I'm also I'm teaching them these pro-social lies, like social etiquette. How did you like Nona's rapini? My son will lie to make her happy because I've taught him be polite, or to receive a gift that he might not like as much. So I'm equating pro-social lies with white lies. Is there data to suggest that it's okay that I take this path with my kids, and that
that's a parental choice, right? And that's an important question, is to reflect, because for a lot of people, those parents, we see that we've done research with parents. We've asked them, what are your messages, and to think about it. And some parents definitely, that's okay. Like the example I gave you, my colleague, they actively tell children to tell these lies. Other parents, they don't actively tell their children to tell these lies. They only say honesty is good, but then they kind of implicitly encourage them to tell those lies. And these lies can be culturally determined too, right? In different places, we may have stronger cultural conventions to tell a certain type of lie versus another type of lie. So I think what's important always is that whatever your message is, you're good with that message. That reflects your values, and B, that your behavior is in line with your message. And then I think that's clear. But then you have to let the children understand, and when they're young, when they're 3, 4, 5, they really see things in a very clear-cut, concrete way. But as they get older, you can understand the nuances of behavior and to have discussions about behavior. Why did we conceal in this situation? So for me, because I do so much work in this thing, I think about this a lot, and I try to be honest. I try all the time to be honest, but it's hard sometimes. So I had this situation happen to me recently where a friend gave me a book. It was a great book, so good that I already had the book and had read it. But my friend, she doesn't have much money. She's on disability. So I know that, she was giving me this because it was a very thoughtful thing. She saw that and thought, oh, I know Victoria would like this. And so she'd gotten it from me. And I thought, oh God, if I say I have it, she's going to feel bad. She's going to feel take it back. She's going to feel like she has to buy another book. And I don't want her spending any more money on me. She doesn't need to do this. So in the moment I said, oh, thank you. This is great. I love this book. You know, and then I talked to my son about it, and we talked about like, well, what was the way, he's old enough now, so my son's 11, you know, what was the way, was there, in the heat of the moment, sometimes it's hard to think, how do I do this honestly? And like, what was a way I could talk to her about it, you know, without hurting her feelings, but also letting her know, you know, so there are situations that you have to do, and you can, especially your 11-year-old, you can for sure have these kind of conversations with them. But really is about deciding what you value and believe, making a conscious thinking about it consciously, making a decision on that, and then giving that message to your child and making sure that all that you do is aligned with that. And that's a very powerful way to teach your child. And it also, you will be happier as an individual. When we live who we wish to be, we always feel better about ourselves.
Thank you so much, Victoria. Thank you, everybody, for your questions. We will, if you do have additional questions, you can reach out to Victoria during the break. We'll have a break shortly, and then we'll be, you know what? I'm just going to pass you the mic.
We're going to have a break right now until 11:10. So please stand up, stretch, go to the washroom, grab another snack, and Bowser and Blue will be next. And they've already done their sound check, and they will be ready to go at 11:10. So we'll see you there then.
Now for our second keynote session. Whether it is food, drugs, screens, or pornography these external processes may have become a primary way in which children have learned to cope with challenges they may face. With years of experience working with both parents and children, youth struggling with dependencies to behaviors or substances, we've invited Bill Young from Chabad Lifeline to present some concepts we hope can better support parents who suspect their children are developing issues with dependencies or addiction. What are some of the signs? How can we approach this conversation with our children? What types of services are out there? The workshop will be presented by Bill Young and will include a testimonial of someone in recovery who will speak to their firsthand experience. Bill Young is a drama therapist originally from Edmonton, Alberta. He holds a Master of Arts from Concordia University and a Bachelor of Education from the University of Alberta. He has worked clinically for the West Montreal Readaptation Center, Centre de l'Éducation des Adultes d'Outremont, Center of Arts and Human Development, Native Montreal, and is currently a youth counselor at Chabad with the English Montreal School Board. Bill is interested in how creative elements such as play, storytelling, and embodiment can help clients imagine and take on new roles, such as sober self, and encounter them in an organic, patient, and playful manner. So I welcome Bill Young.
Thanks, Daniel. Thanks for that introduction. And thanks, Bowser and Blues, for playing that awesome set. I think I've seen it all. Never think I would see a rap song about the pandemic. So my name is Bill. I'm going to figure out how this works. I'm not going to show the video, but if we have time, I'll come back. I'm a youth coordinator and counselor at a place called Chabad Lifeline. We're an outpatient addiction center in Côte-des-Neiges. We support people who are struggling with addiction, but also family members as well. As working in a family systemic way is something that we found in our experience and in the research the most effective way of working with addiction and dependency. So today what I'm going to do is kind of talk a bit about what I understand as addiction and dependency, because there's a lot of meanings behind what that means, and I'm going to clarify the bit. And then I'm going to talk a bit about some concepts that our parent coach typically works with, and then I'm going to pass it over to Ivan, who's going to share his story. So a little bit about us. We're an addiction outpatient center. We're family-oriented, so we work with the family. So when someone comes in, it's not just the person we're working with, but we try to involve as many people as possible. Most of our services at the moment are no cost for clients, and there's no waiting list, and there's groups and one-on-one counseling and parent coaching. A little bit about me. I think Daniel did a great job introducing me. You knew more than I thought you did. I'm a former school teacher, actually, from Alberta. I used to teach at this school called Ross Shepherd. We were talking about, school sizes, and I think it was a high school, about 2,000 people. And something that I really discovered working there was that I think teachers are very much the first responders to a lot of things, social things, emotional things. And as teachers, I think we're in a place where we could support kids and teenagers the best. And so that really, I was encountering a lot of things in my work as a teacher, and I discovered that, man, I don't know much about how to support my students beyond teaching them the curriculum. So that's what inspired me to go and do more training and therapy. So because there's a smaller group here, I think we could maybe make it a bit more interactive. So when you talk about addiction and dependency, what comes up for you in your minds? And you could all just shout it out. Drugs, yeah. What else? Screens, okay. Abuse, food. You can't stop, yeah. And you're doing this waving motion, yeah. It's like a cyclical thing, yeah. Yeah, what else? Okay, lack of self-control. Hunger. I like that. You know, there's a famous book called about addiction written by a guy named Gabor Mate, and it's called In the Realm of Hungry Ghosts. And he talks about this metaphor in Buddhist teachings that, and there's this image of this creature with this big belly, and no matter how much it ate, it never felt full. And he used that as a way of describing addiction. What else? Internet? Yeah, okay. That seems to be a theme. Video games, yeah. So later on in the week, we're supposed to do a presentation in one of those webinars about screen addiction. So that's definitely something we'll talk about. Anything else? Great answers. So in our minds, there's, you know, today I'm going to give a more general kind of addiction presentation. But in our minds, you know, there are, addiction is addiction. It's not really about the thing, you know, whether it's the internet or drugs or processes. But to help classify, in our minds, there's two kinds of addictions. The first one is substances. That's typically what gets the most attention and money. You know, here are some examples of substances from narcotics, inhalants, cannabis, alcohol, and so on. And of course, there's a lot of things that I could talk more about in terms of safe drug use and what certain combinations of drugs are more dangerous than others. But the one thing that I will say is typically if someone is using drugs, one of the best practices is to have an naloxone kit in your house. These are opiate agonists, and so this is a tool that people use to address overdoses, especially particularly with opiates. Another addiction that often gets neglected is this thing called process and behavioral, right? So a substance is something that a psychoactive thing that you put in your body that changes the chemistry in your brain, and as a result, you get a certain kind of high and whatnot. A process behavior is a process or a behavior that you become addicted to, right? So earlier, you know, people mentioned a lot about internet and video game addiction. That would connotate in terms of a process and behavioral addiction. And so more and more, actually, there's research talking about this phenomenon. And what they're finding is that this cognitive processes and the neurological processes that happen in substance addictions are very similar to the ways in which the brain works in terms of process addictions, right? So one famous study is in 2016, and they did an MRI scan of someone who's addicted to gambling, which is considered a process addiction. It's a behavior that, you know, someone said you repeat over and over again. And then someone who's addicted to cocaine, right? Cocaine is a substance. Now, what they found was that when they showed images of cocaine to the cocaine addict, and they showed images of gambling to the person who's addicted to gambling, the same neural pathways got activated, right? So in a lot of ways, the reward systems that happen to someone who's addicted to substances are very similar to the way that someone's addicted to any video games, gambling, pornography, and whatnot, right? So at the end of the day, and we'll talk a bit more about that, is that I'm not trying to say that being addicted to cocaine is the same as being addicted to video games, but there's a lot to learn in terms of how our brain works. So the second concept I want to introduce is the idea of a spectrum, right? So use is always, in our minds, on a spectrum. Not everybody who plays video games is addicted, right? not everybody who has a glass of wine is addicted, right? We could lay ourselves in anywhere in this spectrum. And typically when I do these presentations in schools, I will ask the students, you know, think about something that you do frequently, something that you lean on, and where you might put yourself on this spectrum, right? Whether that be watching Netflix, whether that be having a glass of wine, whether that be going to work out in the gym, or playing Call of Duty, or whatever it is, right? So maybe I'll give you guys a minute just to think about where, you know, something that you guys might do and where you put yourself in that spectrum. Anyone want to share? I'll give you one. I'll give you one. Something that I go do a lot is scroll my Instagram and TikToks, okay? And I find that whenever I have a really tough client and I have a really tough day, I find myself doing that more and more and more. In fact, it has been a very powerful tool for me to procrastinate all the paperwork and administrative work that I have to do, right? And somewhere I would put that is like a chronic compulsive place there, right? So I'm going to talk a little bit about how do you kind of figure out where you are in terms of the spectrum here. Well, there's three things. One is, do you have cravings, right? Essentially, cravings are things, is when you think about it when it's not around, right? So when we're talking about video games, how often do you think about video games when you're not playing? How often do you think about gameplay when you're not playing, right? How often do you talk to your peers about it, right? That could be a sign. Does it provide some temporary relief, right? So when you're stressed out and when things are really tough, is this the first place that you go, right? TikTok is the thing for me right now. And the most important factor is, do you continue despite the consequences, right? So if the consequences are much more severe and the person continues, or the family members continue to allow it to happen, then maybe we're talking more in terms of the sort of deeper end of the spectrum there, right? So what are some of the consequences that I'm talking about? So this is something we borrowed from a psychologist in Australia who talks a lot about screen addiction, Brad Marshall. And he categorizes it into 5 different things: health, emotional, social, behavioral, and educational. So the first one is health. Are they taking care of themselves, right? Are they eating? Are they bathing? Are they sleeping? Are they doing physical exercise? Things that you typically would deem as something that contributes to health. The second thing he would say is emotional. Do you notice changes in the emotions? Are there more mood swings? Do you notice that maybe there is more sort of extreme emotional outbursts? Maybe there is more negative self-talk that this person has. Social, so what kind of people are they hanging out with, right? Are they hanging out with people that tend to use more drugs, or are they tending out with people more? Are they only hanging out with people online, right? Behavioral. So I think earlier we were talking about, there was a presentation about lying, right? And this is a good example of that. If you start to notice that there's a lot more lyings, if you notice that the truth is always kind of skewed in terms of where they've been, what they've done, why their eyes are red, why they're tired all the time, that could also be a sign. More conflict. And then the last one is, because most of, because we're in a school board conference, educational things are a good sign, right? Like, how are they doing with school? Are you getting phone calls from the school saying that they're missing class all the time, or assignments aren't being handed in, or even a change in attitudes about school, right? Like, you know what? There's no point in doing school. I'm just going to fail it anyway. So what's the point anyway? So these are 5 kind of things that you might be able to notice to see like where they are in terms of the spectrum there, eh? Now, one of the biggest things that we believe at our center is that addiction and dependency, wherever they are in the spectrum, right? That's why I say dependency, is that it is always a response to something larger. Earlier we were listening to Dr. Talwar talk about, when your kid starts lying, what do you actually want to do? And one of the things you want to do is to understand what's going on. Why did you tell the lie? What's underneath it all, eh? And so Gabor Mate, I quoted him earlier, he has this famous quote which says, don't ask why the addiction, but why the pain, right? And so until we start to address some of the issues that are going underneath, whether it is trying to belong, which I'll talk a little bit more, or not feeling good about themselves, or feeling like they're not doing anything in their rest, those things, typically a dependency and addiction continues to happen, right? And this is where parents come in. Parents are probably the greatest force of socializers for our children, right? So this is pretty dramatic and extreme, I'll say that. But I included it because I feel like everyone who walks in through my doors, whether they are on the left side of the spectrum or the right side of the spectrum, there is some common threads within these 4 belief systems, right? So this is something that came up that a psychologist called Patrick Carnes developed, and he typically works with process addictions. And he says these 4 things. Most of his clients believe in that, 1, I'm basically a bad, unworthy person, so I don't feel really good about myself, right? And so, typically when you hear someone talk about drinking, they'll say, it was a solution. I didn't feel good about myself. I had a drink, and suddenly I was handsome. I was charming. People talked to me. I was funny, right? It's always a solution. Or when someone is, here, I'll give you a story. So we were working with a 10-year-old kid. Mom called, and she was really concerned about her son because he was spending a lot of time playing games online and missing school. And no matter what Mom did, it didn't stop him. In fact, it made it worse. In fact, he'd always kind of yell back, and there would be these sort of physical conflicts that they would have. And so we said, okay, let's give it a try. So we started, our parent coach, Linda, started working with the parents, and I started working with the kid. And the more we started talking about it, the more I learned about his life and the context in which this was all happening. And what I discovered was the kid, he was living in Montreal, and then he had moved to a small town where he knew no one, and he was going to a new school where he wasn't adjusted, he didn't know anyone there, and he hated it. And the reason why he wanted to play games on Sundays was because that was his opportunity to play with his friends that he still had in Montreal, right? So it didn't become an issue. I mean, the screen thing was one of the issues, but now we started to understand what were the bigger things, right? Which is helping him transition into the new school and helping him process the grief of leaving his old home, right? And so with the parent coach, we work to do that. So, yeah, so it's typically a solution to a bigger thing. The second one is no one would love me as I am. My needs are never going to be met if I have to depend on others, and therefore drugs and processes are my most important need, right? These are fundamental human needs, and the only thing that's going to give that to me is my joint or is my time with Call of Duty, because my joint and Call of Duty isn't going to yell back at me. I know exactly what it's going to do, right? So yeah. Now, addiction doesn't affect just the user, but family members as well. And so typically the focus is usually on the person who is using, and in our experience, either siblings or spouses don't get as much of the attention as possible. And what we want to say here is that they need the support just like anyone else. And so here's the part. Here's a nice picture of Banff, Alberta. So here are some things that Linda has passed on over to me that she thought would be helpful to present to parents. So there's really two things that she wants you to take back with you. The first one is, as a parent, if I have a child who is struggling with an addiction or a dependency, what are the two things to remember? The first one is your relationship, right? And the earlier presentation did a really good job about that, which is you want to create as much of a relationship as possible. You want to create an environment where exploring and talking about these things is possible, right? You want to create an environment where lying is maybe not the best thing to do. So how do we do that? Well, we come at it in a curious place, right? Understanding what's going on is important in terms of doing that. We have to understand as parents that control is not influence, right? It's hard to control our kids, but we can influence them to do maybe less riskier things. And that there is a solution, that there are things that parents can do, right? Oftentimes we hear parents feeling like, well, there's everything I do makes it worse. Everything I do causes a fight, right? And the reality is it doesn't have to be that way, actually. And that's the message we want to send to you guys. And the next thing is self-care, and we said compassion and boundaries, right? It's important to take care of yourselves as well. It's kind of like that image of the putting the oxygen mask for yourself before you put on for the kid, right? Taking care of yourself allows you to be better present for your kids. And understanding that there are certain lines and boundaries that you guys might have, and it's okay to say it's not okay that you're crossing that boundary, right? And to get help for yourself if you get to a place where you feel like you're overwhelmed. That's totally good too. What works? Listening and understanding, positive communication, right? Typically, if Linda will kind of say if there's if I put a tape recorder in the household, what am I gonna typically hear? Is it mostly criticism? Is it mostly where the hell were you at night, or why are you lying to me? Why, and so on. And so what she says is, what if we started to pay attention to the positive things that are happening? What if we started increasing the positive communications that we are having with our kids? Paying attention to being present and your emotional regulation, taking the 5 before you encounter your kid if you're really upset, not taking it personally, though that is hard. Acknowledge and recognize the positive things you see. Establish boundaries. Know where your boundaries are. What are you willing to accept, and what are you not willing to accept? And what are the things in between you're willing to negotiate? Taking care of yourself and seeking support for yourself. And so one of the things that we do is parent coaching. It's Linda Aber does it. She typically does presentations here too. So what is parent coaching? Well, it's a program. She'll work one-on-one with parents to empower them and to help them in terms of their interactions with their kids, to help guide them to have more positive, supportive, non-confrontational responses with their kids, and then also influence their kids to work with a youth counselor as well. So this is something that we introduce. This is a tool that we have in terms of, if I do need help and we are on the sort of more right-hand side of the spectrum, what are some things that we can do? The first one is notice the change, right? Earlier we were talking about emotional, social, health, educational. Notice the change, maybe bring it up. Express your concern, refer to support, say there are resources that are out there. Most of them are free, and then follow up. See if that's something that they're willing to get support with. And ultimately that there's hope, right? Even though it may feel overwhelming and that there's nothing that you could do or everything you do is overwhelming, every small step counts, right? And that is my part of the presentation. I'm going to pass it over to Ivan, who's going to share a firsthand experience. And then I think we'll have time for questions after. So.
Good afternoon. Is this on? Yeah. Sorry. So you can. Does anybody have any questions? Yes. Yeah, it's a great question. Did everybody hear that question? So, was there anything in the relationship with my mom essentially that kept me coming home? And the truth is, my mom was pretty open with me and was honest with me, right? And it's not like a lack of love, right? That wasn't it at all. It's the fact that I knew that my mom would really go to great lengths for me, and I always really appreciated that, right? I always knew I could tell her anything. I mean, the consequences, sometimes there'd be consequences, and sometimes she would not be able to get me out of these situations, like legally, right? I was gonna have to do time, but she always had my back. And when you know your parent has your, and that's something I tell my kids, I said, be honest with me. I'm not gonna agree with everything you do, and there will be consequences, but it's better that you're honest with me. My daughter, Athena, I saw her on her phone, and I didn't like the energy I saw while she was texting. Something about her energy made me say, can I see your phone, please? And she did not hand it to me. She just showed it to me. And I said, scroll down. And she was doing everything she could to scroll and not show me the full conversation. Then I said, give me the phone. I looked at it, and turns out there's a boy now, right? First time. And she started crying, and I asked her, and she said she thought she would get in trouble because a boy likes her and she likes a boy. And I said, I'll never get mad at you for liking a boy or a boy liking you. You're an amazing person. Of course a boy's gonna like you. What I'm mad at is that you lied to me about it. So we sat there for an hour and we talked. She told me about him. He bought her a Pepsi. They're at school, they're friends. And I told her, I need to think about what it means to date, because that's young to me, 13. I said, let me think about it and talk to your mom. The answer is probably going to be no. I'd probably her not date now. But at least we were open and honest, and now she talks to me about what's going on with him. Yes. Thank you, brother. Appreciate it. My man. Anyone else? Now's the time, because once I leave, I'm gone.
During your presentation, there was a slide with a phrase, the not why the addiction, but why the pain. And I'm just, in my mind, I was just wondering, is there always pain when it comes to addiction, or is it possible that there are certain I don't want to say if personalities, like for example, my son has ADHD, and he's in the process of being diagnosed with ASD. He hyper focuses. Before he learned about video games, he knew the piano, and he was addicted to the piano, which was a great addiction. I didn't have any problems with him being hours and hours on the piano and memorizing really hard classical music pieces. But then a family member introduced video games, and the things that you said, behavior, check. Like emotional, check. Like the health is not there. He hasn't changed his appearance. He does still shower, and like he does all these other things. But yes, like it's a conflictual. Like he's talking about it around the clock. Peeling him off it is arguments. And he just is obsessed with it, and it's a discussion every day, and it's an argument every day. And it scares me too that in the family on husband's side there's alcoholism. There seems to be like an addiction thing going on, because I see it in there's some traits, or maybe it's the ADHD. I don't know how the brain works. I don't know how any of this works. I'm a parent, I'm learning. My son is in a special school right now. But I want to know how to protect him, how to raise him. And for me, my parenting is all or nothing. I take it away because your personality is just not good for this buddy. And my husband is not like that. And I'm trying to figure out what to do.
That's a great, great question. And it, that comment's a bit generalized, hey, that it's always a response to pain. And I think in a way, certain, there's actually there's a study here that's done at UDM. They have a whole program called Preventure, which is working with young people based on 4 different kind of personality traits that are more prone to addiction. And so, in my mind, where you are in the spectrum, if you're addicted or not, it's really based on the consequences. So, like you said, he was addicted to piano, but the consequences weren't totally overwhelming and detrimental. But to answer your question, what can I do as a parent? I think getting support for yourself, actually, and our Linda Aber, she works a lot with parents with kids with ASD or a learning disability, and so that could definitely be something that I think you could do if that's something that you're up to.
Oh, we have another question up here. Oh.
So I also really enjoyed your story, Ivan. There was a lot that I could relate to, so thank you for sharing. My question is, was there anything at all that your mother could have done to change your course of your life?
Yeah, it's funny. She'd asked me that over the years, and the answer is no. Had she taken the position of, because I was like, my pain was a deep pain that I guess therapy, but I went through therapy as well. Even that wasn't enough. I just feel like sometimes we have this path and we got to walk it. She did her best. She tried to protect me as much as possible. I lived in a safe environment. I chose to go to the projects, right? She tried to like be disciplined with me, right? But at one point, there's absolutely nothing that she could have done, right? Even if she would have sent me away somewhere, it still wouldn't have changed this. In AA, it's called a geographical cure, right? You're getting drunk all the time. So you know what? I'm going to move somewhere and I'll start over there. But you still go with your problems, right? And so I don't think there's really anything more she could have done. And I really mean that. Had there been something, sure, I would have, I definitely would have told her. But she did her absolute best. And, I commend her for it because it was tough, man. But I just, Thursday, my father died on Sunday that just passed. And we just buried him on Thursday. And my mom had every reason to want nothing to do with going to that funeral after how he treated her. But she, showed up here from Toronto for the funeral and even spoke at it. And that's the kind of person she is. And that's like what I grew up with, right? She's like, take the high road, man, as much as humanly possible. So yeah, that my answer is no, unfortunately. I don't think there's anything she could have done.
This will be the last question.
I appreciate your story also. And actually, I have a friend that is going through an addiction. And he's been going back and forth into different programs and then even left, the country to, try and change your place. And maybe that would work. And it works for, a year or something. And it's been about almost 10 years, 10 years that he is going back and forth. What kept you, what's your motivation not to, to actually stay strong and, continue the way you're going? What's the main thing that help you succeed?
Okay, so I got sober. Initially, it was I did not want to lose my children, right? And it was becoming very painfully obvious that I was going to lose any and all access to them. People will always say you can't get sober for someone else. You got to get sober for yourself, right? That's something that people will always say. I call BS on that, just for the reason that you get sober for any way you can, do it. That's what I did. I did it for them. As I got sober for longer and longer, then I started realizing I was worth getting sober for. And then it became for me. But at the beginning, it was, I didn't want to lose them. And how I stay sober, it's a daily reprieve. I still attend 4 meetings a week, AA meetings at night. I still do service at all of them, okay? We have a 12-step program, and one of the ones, step 4, you write down every resentment you have in your life against institutions, against people, however, whatever resentment, you write that down. Then you have a column about sexual conduct. Then you have a column about fears. What are your fears? And you write all that stuff down. And in the column of fear, you write, you know, I'm afraid of this. And then, but then you write solution, like it's a solution-based program. And then step 5 is you read that entire thing to your sponsor, someone you trust, your deepest, darkest, like we're only as sick as our secrets. You go through that process, and then you help someone else. Step 12 is giving it back and taking someone else through the steps. That's what keeps me going, helping people get sober. If I just keep this stuff for myself, there's no way I'll be able to stay sober, man. I'm not cured. I'm recovered as an alcoholic, but I could easily, if I get away from what works, I can easily fall by the wayside. And I'm not willing to do that.
Thank you. Thank you, Ivan. Thank you, Bill. Can we switch over to the MC slide? Lifeline. There potentially might be another talk during the lunch and learns with Chabad, but we highly recommend you reach out to them. Check the links through our page. How about a mic? We'd like to invite you to get up and head over to the exhibitor hall. They've been waiting pretty much all day. We got a little delayed today, but there's some great resources for parents. So check it out before you leave. And there will be a treat if you get some stamps from the exhibitors.
And then before heading out, we want to take a moment to thank today's speakers. So all of these people have been involved in, and some of them are speakers, some of them are EMSB community experts, some of them are staff. We just want to thank everyone at Rosemont High School as well, Mr. Butino, Mr. Cooperwood, our technicians, Joey Sino and Nick Fotakis. A big shout out goes to all of the stuff that you found in your swag bags. Well, that's from our adult centers, so Rosemont Tech, High School of Montreal, Galileo Adult Education Center, JFK, Laurier Mac Career Center, and SHAD. And our exhibitor hall people that you will be meeting in 1 second from Oxford, Learn, the Cadets Victory number 6 Scouts. We have Science en Folie and Gamers Universe. And then a big thank you to the people who were part of the workshops for children. And then finally, to our great programming. These are our programming partners for Lunch and Learns. So this week we're going to be showcasing a lot of live streamed Lunch and Learns with the following partners. And I just want to take an opportunity to thank you all and to thank our volunteers, So we have Laura Zunay, Tony Speranza, Serena Caplet, Joseph Renone, Nadia Ramundo, Real Appel, and myself, Dan, and Brendan Zorbis. We're your organizing committee. We hope you've had a great time. And we want you to enjoy the rest of the day. So please go see your exhibition partners, get them to stamp your paper, and go get some TCBY. We hope you've enjoyed your morning with us and wish you a great sunny afternoon. Enjoy. Thank you so much.
I just want to say this would not have happened without Marika's extreme, excellent leadership and very, very hard work.
Dan did this for many, many years too, so we're not going to let you get away with that.
Thank
that
you,
is
Marika.
just as amazing.
All right. And the whole team and Rosemont High School. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Bye.